Thank you for joining me for my lightning talk on the Bitmap Style Designer here at CodeRage. My name is Sarina DuPont and I'm a Senior Product Manager at Embarcadero Technologies. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to create a custom style for my Windows application for the T-switch control. So if I drag and drop T-switch onto my form here, you can see that if I select the Style Lookup menu, I have a single style option. And what I want to do now is apply a modern Windows 10 style to this control and then customize that style. So to get started, I'm going to go to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer, and this brings up the Bitmap Style Designer. And this is the tool that we also use to create all of our styles, the default styles and the premium styles. And so I thought today I'd walk you through the steps of creating your own custom style. So the way the Bitmap Style Designer is designed is you'll see here that we have kind of a blank form or a getting started point with a style PNG, and we have a lot of templates that you can choose from. So in this case, we're going to choose File New, click right here, and we're going to select a new Windows Modern style. And this gives us a Windows 10 style template. So now if I expand the images node here, you'll see we have style, which is the 1x style. This is also the style that's used at design time, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. Now, we provide 3x to account for high-resolution devices. This is something that you don't necessarily need to do for Windows application and when you're creating a custom style, but it's recommended. So what you can see here is I have the different styles. So now what I want to do, I want to go in and actually customize the style for T-switch. Here you can see the style elements that are part of the switch control. So this is a round shape. This is in the Windows 10 style. And I want to replace that with my own custom style. Now I'm going to move over to Photoshop and I'm going to show you how I created the style elements for the switch control style. Now you don't need to use Photoshop. You can also use another image editing program. But my goal today was to show you and give you a better understanding of how to lay out the style elements that you will ultimately use to create a custom style for either all of your controls or some of the controls in your application. So here's a layout that I have created. You can see this is the switch frame. This is the fill. And then we have the thumb that is activated as you're sliding the switch control. So we need our graphic in 4 different resolutions, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. And we also have to follow those naming conventions. So what I have here is you can see I have a transparent PNG, and this is the layout I've created for my switch. The way that I did this is I just did File, New in Photoshop, and you select your pixels. So in this case, I've set it to 180 pixels by 120 pixels. I've zoomed in, so it's easier to do the layout. And then I've just used the rectangle tool to draw a shape. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool here. And in this case, I'm going to deselect the fill color and just do a stroke outline. So this is my rectangular shape. And then I can just right click and select duplicate layer. And this below here is going to be, I'm going to move this down. This is going to be the filled shape, the filled frame. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my control here, and I'm going to select a fill color. And I'm going to deselect the stroke. So this is a good example of the frame and the fill colors. You can see this matches what I did right here. And then we want to create the thumb. So one of the things you could do, of course, as well, is you could select your original rectangle. You could select, right-click it, and select duplicate layer. Then you select it and move it over, and then now you could resize it, and that ensures that it has the proper height. And now you can fill this. Again, you go back to the rectangle. I'm going to change the fill color, let's say to blue. The stroke, I don't want to show a stroke on the thumb graphic, and then I can right-click this again, and I could go ahead and select duplicate layer. Use the move tool, and I can go move down the shape. And I can go and select the rectangle again, and I'm going to change this to a different fill color. You don't need to start out with a 180 by 120 pixel graphic. That's really up to you. Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to start out with a shape that's large enough that when you are done saving this out as the 3x graphic, and you should follow the same naming convention. So I have switch 30x, and then you should do switch 20x for 2x, switch 15x for 1.5x, and switch.png. There's no number for the 1x. Because the actual Bitmap Style Designer looks at the naming convention of the PNGs that you're adding to determine the resolution of those graphics. So it's really important that you're following the same naming convention. So then if you wanted to resize this, you could go to image size and you could select 50%, for example, to go from 3x to 1.5x. And then you would go back and go to File, Save As, and you would save this out as your PNG. For example, my switch 1.15x.png. Okay, so now let's go back to the Bitmap Style Designer. So right here, I'm going to select Images, I'm going to select Add, and I'm going to browse to my folder where I have my switch graphics. So this is switch.png. This is my switch 1x size. And I'm going to go to switch 15x. So now I'm going to add my 2x resolution switch control graphic. And then I'm going to add my 3x resolution graphics. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the objects tree. And then right over here, I'm going to select to add a new switch element. Okay, so here it is, and you can see it has a frame and a thumb. So I'm going to select style object 1_switch, and I'm going to rename this to a new name. And the new name is what you will ultimately see when you have the style loaded and applied to your application in the style lookup drop-down menu. So this name here is what you will see in the style lookup drop-down. So I'm going to say my custom switch CodeRage. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select frame and I'm going to select bitmap. Going to go to 1x right here, and you can zoom in because you want to map out this control, so it makes it a lot easier if you're able to zoom in. And so for frame, I just want this graphic right here. The purple color is actually to indicate the transparency. So I'm going to click up here, and then I'm going to control click down here and hit apply. And for pressed, I'm going to select the green color, which is the fill color for my switch control, and then control click right here. And you just want to outline the graphic. Select apply. And then I'm going to right click onto the new switch control and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. So what that means is, as you saw, I just mapped out the frame control, mapped it to the frame and the fill color, and I only did that for the 1x resolution. So in order not to have to manually go through and actually do that for all the resolutions, all I had to do is select automatically adjust objects, and you'll see that this has added the other style objects. So this has added a frame for 1.5x. This has added a frame for 2x and for 3x. And if I go and select bitmap for 3x, for example, you can see that this is already mapped to my graphic. Now we want to do the same for the thumb. So for the thumb, we're going to select bitmap, and we're going back to 1x. Click, and then control click, hit apply, and we're going to select bitmap pressed, 1x, and we're going to select it, and then control click, and hit apply. And again, we want to apply and propagate those changes to 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. So we're going to go up here and select automatically adjust object for all graphic resolutions. So that applies all the changes across all the graphics. And then you can also right click here and select test object style. And you can test that for all the resolutions. So you can right click here and select test object style with 2x resolution, and then you're able to test the 2x resolution. So now I'm going to save my style. And then I'm going to actually save it out. So first I just saved my style template, and I'm going to save out my style as a FireMonkey style. So you want to select .style from the drop-down menu and hit save. And I'm going to close the Bitmap Style Designer. So now I'm going to drop a style book onto my form. I'm going to load my custom style. I'm going to browse to the location right here. We have the style CodeRage.style. That's the style that we just created. I'm going to close this and apply the style to the style book. Then on the form, I'm going to activate and select the style book. Now you can see it has the Windows 10 style. And if I select T-Switch and I go to the style lookup, you can see now I have my custom switch. This is my CodeRage custom switch style element. And if I resize the Object Inspector pane here, you can see that the style element has the exact name that I assigned earlier via the Bitmap Style Designer. So let's hit run and we can have a look at the style. Now you can see that this control currently has a fixed size. So what if I want to resize the control and make it resizable? I can go back to Tools, Bitmap Style Designer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my style template. Going back to my location right here, the .vsf file, that's my style template. Then I'm going to expand the Objects node. And under the Objects node, I'm going to browse to my custom switch underscore CodeRage, select a frame, and I'm going to set margins. So I'm going to set 2 here for margin bottom, left, right, and top. And I'm going to do the same for the thumb. And by setting margins, we're enabling the ability to resize the control. So after setting that, I'm going to right-click and select Automatically Adjust Object for all graphic resolutions. And then if you have a look here, for example, it automatically sets the proper margins for 1.5x, for 2x, etc. I'm going to hit Save. And I'm going to save this out as a style file again. So for example, CodeRage, style CodeRage 2. And then I'm going to load the style. Double click on the style book. Select the style. Close the style editor. And then you can see here now I can go in and actually resize the control. So this gives you the extra flexibility if you want to have a style that has a resizable switch control.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarina. Mark's got a question. Says, looks really nice to be able to change styles at that level. Says, but for quick prototyping and building apps, it would be nice to have a color property on the visual controls. Is there a reason that the color property hasn't been added or can't be added?
So it depends on the style and it depends on the control. We have an integrated style designer. That's the FireMonkey Style Designer that we actually made a lot of enhancements to in the Berlin release that you can bring up if you right-click Edit Custom Style or Edit Default Style. Depending on the option selected, you're either creating a new style for all button controls. For example, if you right-clicked on T button on your form, or for just that particular button. Within that control, you can make color changes. So for example, for T button, you could easily right-click on that control, bring up the Integrated Style Designer, and change the fill color. So you're able to do that via the Integrated Style Designer today. Now, some controls, and specifically, for example, T-Switch, where you have a lot of individual elements and you also want them to look nice across all the different target platforms, and you're looking to, for example, have a pattern on a thumb graphic. So for example, if you had a blue or a brown switch control and you wanted to have like a leather look or different types of UI elements and have them look a certain way beyond just a minimalist UI, then it makes a lot of sense to go into the Bitmap Style Designer and add those controls to ensure that they look crisp. Because if you just work with a single resolution, this is even true for Windows, you're going to have a lot of high resolution displays where you're going to see blurry graphics. And that's one of the key reasons why you would want to go through the Bitmap Style Designer. But to answer your question, if you right click on a control on the form, you're able to bring up the Integrated Style Designer and you're able to make some changes such as color changes pretty quickly doing that. If you go to community.embarcadero.com and you go to our blog section on the community site, you should see my blog there. And I recently, well, it's been a couple months, but I did a blog post a couple months back on changing the color fill for T-Button using the Integrated Style Designer, and I walk you through the steps of doing that.
When you do the blog post for this video, maybe you can link back to that.
Yes, I will do that. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Modern day controls look so flat since Vista. Are there any 3D styles in the default styles that are available?
So a lot of that has changed over the years in general. If you look at the modern UIs across iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, they've all gone from a kind of a beveled, embossed look to a very flat, minimalist UI. And that's just the modern theme that you see nowadays. That certainly doesn't keep you from creating your own custom styles. We have Also premium styles that provide a custom UI pattern and a custom UI theme. There's nothing specific that's 3D centric because a lot of the styling that you see nowadays has moved away from that, but it's certainly nothing that would keep you from creating a style in the Bitmap Style Designer that has a 3D look and feel.
What is the one that has I can't remember, it's my favorite one. It's got like the grid in the background. That's
right. We have some styles that are the vector styles back from several years ago that have a 3D look and feel. But we moved to the bitmap styles several years ago when we added support for iOS and Android because we're able to better address the very popular and also the common UI theming that you would expect, the native platform rendering and the styling that you would expect to have on the target platforms. And if you remember with iOS 6, there was a very distinct look and feel that you would see on iOS 6, right? It had a very distinct look and feel. It was not minimalist. It had a 3D kind of feeling and it was very photorealistic. And so bitmaps make a lot more sense in that case, especially for scaling. And this is true today, even for controls like T-Switch on iOS and other controls. So we do have some styles that are vector-based styles. We do recommend using bitmap-based styling, especially on mobile, because they render much better. That's one of the key reasons why our styles are bitmap-based. That being said, there are vector-based styles, and some of them have a 3D look and feel, and you can all find all of those styles in the styles folder that is included with Rad Studio Berlin. So if you go into Rad Studio Berlin, you can easily drop a style book onto your form. You can browse to the styles directory, and then you can load any of the styles that are part of that. And they actually segment it into platform. And I've done a lot of blog posts in the past around the reasoning behind styling and how to create the styles, vector styles versus bitmap styles, etc. But if you're building an application for multiple platforms, it really makes a lot of sense to go with bitmap styles, especially if you're looking to have gradients and transparency with gradients and any type of patterns or prints as part of your styling that are unique more than just a simple color fill. It makes a lot of sense to work with bitmap styles.
But one question I get a lot with people is what is the reason of having the styles at different resolutions instead of just having the style at the biggest resolution?
Well, one of them is the 1x resolution is used at design time. So at design time, you can work with styles in FireMonkey, right? So you're loading a style book and you can actually see what that UI is going to look like. Well, at design time, we use the 1x resolution. So you need to create the 1x resolution because that's what's used at design time. And in general, you want to have them scaled properly. You could start with the largest. That is more true for things like bitmaps if you have a background image than it is for the style. But generally speaking, you'll get the best resolution if you have all three styles. Actually four: 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x. Because at runtime, we detect the device resolution and form factor, and we load the appropriate style based on that. And to ensure that all the controls are rendered at their appropriate size, it makes sense, and it's the best approach is to create them in all the different resolutions. What I would recommend, and this makes it really easy, is you create the 3x style first, because that's your largest resolution, right? So if you're working with a designer in Photoshop, which is what most designers use nowadays, have them created in 3x resolution first. So let's say it's 1200 by 1200. And then 1x would be 400 by 400, right? Because it's a third of that size. You create it in 3x first, then you just use Photoshop to render it out, and 50% of the size, 30% of the size, etc. It's very quick to do that in Photoshop. It's also something I showed today during the session. And then you go into the Bitmap Style Designer and you load in your 1x resolution. Then you make the changes and you automatically apply them to all the resolutions. And that's something I showed during the session today. There's a right-click menu that says automatically apply all the changes across all resolutions. So you start out with 3x. You just use Photoshop to render it out in all the appropriate sizes. So 3x, 2x, 1.5x, 1x. You don't have to do anything different in Photoshop. And then you can go into the Bitmap Style Designer, load in all four resolutions, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x, and you make all your UI changes on the 1x. So you map your 1x UI elements to each of the graphics, and then you just hit automatically apply. And the Bitmap Style Designer has built-in functionality to automatically apply all the settings that you've made to the 1x resolution across all other resolutions. So you don't have to painfully go through every single control, map this control to the 1.5x graphics, the 2x graphic, the 3x graphic. You don't have to do any of that manual labor. That's automatically all done for you.
Okay, great. Mel's asking if there's an online step-by-step guide to using the Bitmap Style Designer.
We do have some detailed instructions on the doc wiki. I've also built some really good tutorials in the past on my blog at community.embarcadero.com that highlight how to use both the integrated style designer and the bitmap style designer and the key differences between both of those. But if you go to docwiki.embarcadero.com and you search for bitmap style designer, we have some step-by-step instructions. We also have screenshots of the bitmap style designer with some arrows pointing to what each of the features mean. And I'm going to be blogging after this Code Rage session about the session with additional details along with the style that I showed you today and the sample graphics. And if there's something specific that you think we haven't covered yet or that's confusing to you or that you would like to have more information on, please feel free to comment on my blog post directly with the questions. And I do read through those questions and I do always do my best to try to find answers for you. If I don't have the answer, I'll ask somebody in engineering for it. So if you have a specific question, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Okay, great. Alessandro is saying back in Seattle, fonts didn't work with NVCL styles while using the Bitmap Style Designer. We had to force the font in custom draw events. Has this been addressed in Berlin?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to ask somebody in engineering for it. I'll have to look through the quality portal. If you have a specific quality portal number for a bug related to this issue that you could put into the chat here, then I can check after this session. If not, feel free to send us an email directly. You can email me at sarina.dupont@embarcadero.com. If you don't have my email address, I think Jim's is pretty readily available as well, and he can forward that to me. Otherwise, it's hard for me to know right now. I'd have to double check, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's really important. If you're encountering a bug, I can't tell you how many times I've been encountering a bug, and I was like, oh man, I can't believe this hasn't been fixed yet. And then I ask Marco or Sarina about it. They're like, I've never heard about that. And I'm like, oh. And I submit it, and then it gets fixed.
Right. So that's the thing. I mean, it's important. If you have an issue that you run into, go to quality.embarcadero.com, log in, provide steps, provide a sample project, whatever you can to help us reproduce the issue so that we can address it and have a look at it.
Anton is saying we would like to use styles without having to create our own, but the dark colors, which are okay for mobile apps, are not good for large screen desktop apps. Are there going to be any lighter styles built in?
So that's a good question. We do actually have a bunch of light styles that you can select from. So the default style across Windows and Mac is light. It's a light style, and also across iOS. We do have templates for building your own in the Bitmap Style Designer. And in addition to that, if you go to the Styles directory, that's part of your install folder for Rad Studio Berlin, you can find a whole bunch of styles for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac that are actually light styles. We have a Windows 10 light style, which is a white style with blue accents. And we also have templates in addition to that are light color templates. What you can also do with any of the templates that we provide, you can export the graphics, the PNGs, and as long as you're not relaying out the actual graphical elements as part of the graphics, the four PNGs, 1x, 1.5x, 2x, and 3x, you could take that into Photoshop, use Photoshop's tools for easily changing the color scheme. So Photoshop has a lot of built-in tools for changing things like hue, saturation, etc., which allow you to quickly overhaul the entire color scheme. You could then apply that to all four graphics, which is a very quick process if you know Photoshop, re-import it into Bitmap Style Designer, and you don't have to do anything else. You just hit update, and that's it. You have a brand new style for all resolutions. You don't have to create new shapes. You don't have to create new elements, none of that.
Wow.
So that's another really good thing to focus on. I didn't show that in today's session, but it's really easy for you to go in and just make color changes across the entire graphic that's used for the ultimately used for the style in Photoshop. And if you have a look at the styles folder, you'll see that we have a lot of different light color scheme styles as well. So if you haven't looked at the styles folder, please have a look, and I think you'll find that it likely has what you're looking for.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions. If you've got any other questions for Sarina, put them in really quick. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next lightning talk.
And again, it's been great being here at Code Rage. And after the session, I'm going to be blogging about it, community.embarcadero.com. If you haven't checked out our community yet, it's a great place to learn about new things that we're working on, learn about the product, ask other members of the community questions. So it's a great place to get started.
Is there a multi-layout viewer for apps in Delphi? It'd be nice to be able to have a multi-style viewer to see all styles for a certain app.
So I'm not exactly sure what you're asking for. For that particular question, the Bitmap Style Designer has a built-in style viewer. And what that means is as you're building the style, just like I previewed in the Bitmap Style Designer, the new switch control, you can actually go through the style viewer, and we have that for both VCL styles and FireMonkey, because both VCL styles and FireMonkey styles use the Bitmap Style Designer as the tool for actually creating those the custom styles that you're working on. And using the Bitmap Style Designer, you can also preview the style in the style viewer. So you can preview an iOS style, an Android style, Windows and Mac style in the built-in style viewer. So I'm not exactly sure if that answers your question, but the style viewers would be a good place for you to have a look at, and that's part of the Bitmap Style Designer.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sarina, for all you do. And I always learn so much from you about styles, because it's something I don't know as much about as I think I do. And then I'm like, oh, this is so hard. And then you explain, I'm like, oh, that's so easy.
Well, I think that's something that I'll make sure we do an even better job of than we have in the past. And that is really highlighting that it's easy to get started, and it's not something that you have to shy away from, even if you're not really that familiar with graphics programs like Photoshop.
Okay.